These are just a few of the bags that you can make with my book So Brilliant Bags, published by Search Press. It's absolutely jam-packed full of bag ideas and ideas on how you can create your own bag. But in this video I'm going to show you how to create one of the bags, and it's a variation of the little triple pocket bag that you see here. So this is the one that we're going to make. It's slightly larger than the one in the book, but as I just open this up you can see it fastens with a magnetic clasp, and then inside here is the clever thing because you've got three completely separate pockets, so it's a really unusual little bag. And this is how we make it. So these are the components for my bag. I have 4 pieces of fabric with the check design to make the 2 outside pockets, and then 2 pieces of fabric with my star design, which are going to be the centre pocket. These measure 9 inches square each. As you can see in the bottom 2 corners, I've already rounded those corners off, and I've just used something like a ribbon holder, or if you've got a circle template that would be fine. It doesn't really matter what size it is, as long as it's the same size on each one of the different patterns. On the back of each one of those pieces, I've put some fusible fleece. You could use wadding, you could use batting on there as well, and maybe just use some spray adhesive to hold that in place. And then I've got the flap, which is 2 pieces of fabric measuring 7 inches square, and again I've rounded off the corners. There's the fusible fleece on the back of the outside, not on the back of the lining. And then finally I've got my strap fabric, and this is 1 piece of fabric measuring 34 inches long and 4 inches wide, and I've folded it in half, pressed it, folded the 2 sides in half and press those, and then fold the whole thing in half again and press, and then I'm just going to sew straight down both sides. Right, then we'll put that to one side for just a second, and we'll start constructing the rest of the bag. So remember, I'm having 1 checked pocket on the outside, my star pocket in the centre, and then my last check pocket on the back there. So we'll take 1 piece of the check and 1 piece of the star fabric, line those up so that they match perfectly, and then I'm going to draw a stitch line just in the centre, and this is where I'm going to sew. So let's measure 2 inches from the top and draw a line there. And then we'll have 2.5 inches from the side, 2.5 inches from that side. I'm hoping you can see this, I can see it fine. And that's going to measure 4 inches long. So I should have my box right in the centre for me to sew around. So you can pin those pieces together if you find it easier. I'm okay with it just as it is. So let's bring the machine over and literally sew around the 3 sides of that box that I've just made. So reverse backwards or lock your stitches when you first start, so that's not going to come undone. And also up to the corner, stop with the needle down, across the top, and back down the final side. So again, just to understand the configuration and the way that it goes together, there's no harm in just placing everything together. So I know that that's going to be on the other side of the stars, so that'll make up that pocket. And there's the outside bit of here, and then there's my second pocket, which goes underneath there. So I've got the centre pocket joined to the outside. I'll need to join the other half of the centre pocket to the other outside section, just in the same way. You can see I've joined my fusible fleece there as well, that's not a problem. Okay, so do exactly the same again. So remember I had my box 2 inches from the top, 2.5 inches from each side, and 4 inches in length. 1, 2, 3, 4. And do exactly the same again and just sew around that box. Making sure they're lined up together. And there we go, back down the final side. Right. So now this is how we're looking. So stars fabric will go together. And those are the 2 outside pieces. Before I sew everything together, I'm going to put a magnetic clasp in the middle of the front of the bag. And I'll also need to do that on the lining of the flap. So the best way to gauge how you're going to get this perfectly in place would be to, I'm just going to take the lining section. So that's how it's going to sit. And I'm just going to fold this in half so I can find the centre point and crease it. And then that's going to be pinned to where it's sewn to the back of the bag. And then when the flap comes over to the front, I can measure and mark where the other half of the clasp is going to go on the bag there. So if the clasp goes here, don't have it too close to the edge because I'm going to have about 1/4 inch seam allowance here. So I'm going to go around about an inch, 3/4 inch up from there, and I'm going to draw a circle and then just transfer that into the middle of the bag underneath. I will measure that centrally before I actually make the holes in there and put the clasp on. Okay. I'm just going to remark that on the front of my bag, on the front side, sorry, the right side of the fabric. And I'll show you why. Because now I'm going to put the clasp on. If you've not used a magnetic clasp before, they come in 2 halves and you get a fat bit and a thin bit. The thin bit's going to go in the flap and the fat bit is going to go in the bag. A lot of magnetic clasps you buy will also have a backing on them like this. And if you're going to put a magnetic clasp through just 1 layer of fabric, it may be an idea to just put another piece of fabric just on the back there, just to stop it pulling at the fabric. So I'm going to just adhere that in place with a little bit of repositionable fusible spray. Let's turn this over. There's my mark. Now I'm going to take the back of my magnetic clasp and I'm going to draw a little line either side of that marker made in the middle. And then either take your quick and pick or a very sharp pair of scissors and make 2 small incisions over those lines. Not too big. If you cut your holes too big, you'll have holes in your fabric. If you cut them too small, you can always make them bigger. So then we push the legs of the clasp through those holes. Put the back on, and it doesn't really matter whether you fold the legs in or out. I find it easier to squish them outwards. I just find they bend better that way. So that's how we're looking on the flap of the bag. This is now sewn right sides together with its counterpart, with the curved bit at the bottom, and we're going to leave the top open so we can turn it the right side out. When you come up to these curves, just make sure that you take your time and make that a really nice smooth curve, because if you get a little bit wobbly at this stage, you're not going to have the perfect flap. If you do need to stop and move your fabric around, just make sure that your needle stays in the down position. So just around to the second curve, and I'm using a 1/4 inch or 6mm seam allowance. That doesn't have to be set in stone, as long as you've got the same seam allowance all the way around the bag. so when I open this up, that should be nice and smooth around the curves, with the clasp away from the edge, because I'm going to top stitch this as well. That looks really neat. Okay, so normally I'd take that to the iron and give it a press, but just for speed I shan't. I'll go a little bit longer on the stitches because these are only decorative. And let's just sew all the way around here. Keeping the seam right on the end. So again, when you come to that curve, all I'm doing is guiding the edge of my fabric in against one particular point of the foot. When you come up to where the magnetic clasp is, you can see I've got the lump there. If you do find you're a little bit close, because you don't want the foot of your sewing machine kind of moving against there, because you're not going to get a straight stitch line. Some sewing machines will have the capability of being able to move your needle right over. Otherwise, just pop your zipper foot on there, and that'll allow you to get closer to the clasp, if you need to. Right, so there's my flap. Now I need to put the second half of the magnetic clasp onto my bag before I start to construct the rest of this. So I've already got my mark there. I'm just going to again fold this in half, give it a crease. No, it's pretty much in the centre. I don't need to put any strengthener on the back of this piece of fabric because I've already got the fusible fleece on the back, so I'm not worried about that. So again, mark over the top, sharp pair of scissors or your quick unpick, and cut all the way through and cut through the wadding as well. And there's the second half of my clasp. Remember, that's the fat bit. Through you go. On the back. Squish you open. Ready to go. Okay. So this is the bit where we put it all together. So again, if you want to keep layering up those sandwiches so that you've got an idea of, or get your head around what's going to happen now, because I need to sew these two pieces of the pocket right sides together. So let's move those two out of the way. So that's the front of my bag, the opposite side of the same fabric, and then I've got this in the way. So what I need to do is to fold it out of the way. And I'm just going to put a few pins in there. You can use clips if you prefer, just to literally get that section out of my stitch line. Now I can put these two pieces right sides together, and I'm just sandwiching, as you can see, the second pocket on the inside. So that stitch a bit shorter. And again, if you prefer to pin first, then you can do. I prefer not to. And around we go. Just lining at the edges of your fabric. Again, when you get round to the curve at the bottom here, nice smooth line. Still keep the edges lined. Remember, you've got a big lump in the middle of your fabric now, in the middle of the two pieces. So this is going to want to twist a little bit because I've still got all of this fabric in the way there. There we go. So I'll just go backwards a little bit to lock those stitches off. And then carefully turn this the right side out, because remember you've got pins in there. I'm not going to clip the corners or the curves on this one. I think we'll be fine. Yeah, that's nice neat stitch line. So out you come. And then you can see how the bag actually starts to be formed. Penny kind of drops, doesn't it? Right. So now I'll need to sew the other two pieces together in the same way. So again, I'll need these two right sides together. So again, it's the star bit that I need to fold out of the way. And that plonks on top of there. And again, we'll sew all the way around. just make sure you keep the edges together. Pin if you prefer, or put some clips around there if your fabric's quite thick, around the curve. Because remember, I've still got that big lump inside, so it will want to distort slightly, but take control. Back down the long side, let's go backwards. And let's turn this the right side out. Remember, avoiding those pins. Lovely, right. So now I need these two star pieces with the centre pocket sewing right sides together. Now I've got a big lump in the middle and I'll need to fold that out of the way. So again, just fold those to the centre. I'm not going to pin this time. I'm just going to hold those as I sew. You could do all the 3 pockets in a row if you wanted to, if you found that easier. I just thought this kind of explained what I was doing quite well. And it does really make sense when you see the way that the bag starts to come together. But I think it's quite an impressive bag. When you look inside it, and you'll see when finishing it, you don't see any of the stitch lines through the lining. It can be quite baffling for people to try and figure out how you've made it. Again, let's just push these pockets out of the way, holding the edges of this together, keeping that nice curve on the curve and straight on the straight. Pushing this out of the way. You can make these in any sizes as well. If you've got a finer fabric, you could even add more pockets, but then you're going to get an awful lot of bulk inside there. So I think 3 is quite a good number, but you can make them with two pockets in the same way. There we go, back down the final side. And we're almost ready for the big reveal. There we go. This is it. Out you come. There, look at that. There you go. 3 pockets all joined together. So that's your 3 pocket bag. So what I'm going to do now is to take my flap, and I'm just going to sew that to the centre of the back section. It's exciting when things come together. I love this bag. So just make sure that that's in the middle. You could measure that if you wanted to, but I'm just going to go by eye and have a pin in there. Make sure the flap's facing the right way so that the magnetic clasps are going to marry up. So you can go under there, and we'll just sew within the seam allowance, so about 1/8 of an inch from the very edge, because we are going to put linings in here as well, remember. So that's how we're looking. Just make sure that that meets up, because at this point you can still adjust things, so that is perfect. And then let's put the handle. I know, it's lovely. We're going to put the handle in the centre piece. So one either side facing downwards, and we're going to tack that to either side, then we'll start to put the lining together. So just make sure that's not twisted. Straight over the side seam. Right, that's how we're looking at the moment. So it's time to do the lining. So what I've done with those 3 pockets, or the 6 pieces of fabric, is to sew them all right sides together and leave the top open. I'm going to fold the top over by about 1/2 inch and press that, and do that with all 3 pockets. I'm going to fold the top of this bag over. I'm not going to press it because that's going to be really difficult to keep its shape because of the lining, the wadding. The lining is going to go inside, matching up the side seams, and I'm going to sew those two pieces together as close as I can to the top edge. Keep that nice and straight. So this is really important because this is the real finishing touch. That's why I'm making sure, certainly with my fabric, that I've got the pattern all folded over at the same way, because that would look a little bit odd if it wasn't straight. So make sure you cut your fabric straight. Right, and then the free arm on your sewing machine would probably be a good idea as well. So again, this is really worth it. This is probably the most time-consuming bit of the whole bag that you're going to make. So just make sure that matches up all the way around. And when you're happy that it's all nice and neat and straight, a really nice little top stitch all the way around the top. And then we're going to repeat that with the other 3 pockets. I've got the first and the last pockets sewn in, or the lining sewn in, but I thought I'd show you around the strap area and the easiest way to do that. So I've already folded in the edge of the lining and pressed it. I've also folded over the edge of the outer bag and given that a press as well. But when I come to the straps, I've already tacked those on, remember, earlier on. Just fold the whole of the seam allowance over the same amount all the way around, and then match the seams up as best as you can on top of that. So you can see how nice and neatly that's going to sit. If you can't get pins through there, then these little clips are worth the weight in gold. I'm going to join the seams up first, and then we'll sew all the way around, and do the flap at the back in the same way. So just fold that over, clip it or pin it, and then you can sew. A lot easier when you press it first as well. So just lining up those edges as close as I can, maybe with the lining just a little bit on the inside if anything. I'd rather see more of the outside of the bag on the inside than the inside of the bag on the outside, if that made any sense whatsoever. So I can just keep pushing that in. Lining up the edge. And then you'll need to take the accessory compartment off your sewing machine, so you have a free arm. Just tuck those threads in. And then we'll sew it all the way around the edge. Now I need the rest of the bag tucked out of the way. I think I'll pop the flap inside there and just fold that back, and then carefully thread the whole of the pocket over the free arm. Oh, you need to go out of the way. And this pocket needs to go out of the way. And then we'll start to sew. So I'll start with the needle down, and then as I sew, I'm just going to make sure that I'm keeping loose threads out of the way, keeping those edges lined up as I go, so I can see the lining just underneath there. And I'm just sewing about 1/8 of an inch from the top. Now, because this is quite tight, and I've got all of those clips in, I'm going to take it slowly and just do a few inches at a time. When I come to the handle, I want to make sure that the handle is sticking straight out, so it's not going in at an angle. And again, I've got quite a lot of stuff going on down here, but I'm just keeping the handle straight, these 2 edges together, and I don't mind if the rest gets all bunched up. As long as I'm not sewing through it, that'll be fine. Quite a lot of fabric there over the handle, so just take it easy. And again, just keep feeding this round. There's my lining, there we go. Marrying at the edges as we go. If If you find it easy, you could actually hand tack this, and then you're not fighting your way around clips or pins or anything. But it's worth the effort, because this is going to look so neat when it's finished. I think you're going to be over the moon with it. Keeping that strap straight again. A bit of help underneath the strap again. I'm almost back to the beginning. There we go. Oops. Let's see how we look. Perfect. So there's your finished bag, which you could decorate with a bow or a brooch or a nice big button on the front if you wanted to. And inside here, when you open it up, those are my 3 individual pockets that are all joined together absolutely seamlessly. So that's the larger version of the bag that you'll find in the book. That's the original one. I hope you enjoy making both of them.